between South Africa and Israel, either families and so the Middle East is a very difficult one. The other very sad one now is the Iraq problem, because Iraq doesn't seem to indicate to us that there may be a way out of it. I mean, if you look at the deaths that are happening, and it's just enormous, and it's not clear at what point the United States would say this is a victory, and now everything that was said about Iraq. This is an amazing thing that in the UN there were many people, especially delegations from the Middle East, that predicted that in Iraq at some point you are going to end up with civil war, because the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Kurds, at some point they will turn against each other, or there will be people who will try to get them to fight, and this will happen. And of course, linked to that one is Iran, and the Iranian problem, we would deal with it differently if we're South Africa, because the problem with Iran is that the United States and the Europeans say Iran wants to develop a nuclear bomb. Iran argues that they want nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Now, we agree with them having nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. The problem is that the United States says, and the Europeans say, but how can you trust them that they won't go beyond just using it for peaceful purposes and then having the bomb? And the fact that the Iranian president has made statements about he would want to eliminate the state of Israel from the map, it makes everybody nervous that if indeed they had a bomb, wouldn't they just use it? I mean, then, it makes everybody feel nervous. But these three conflicts, one of the most frustrating thing to us is that it has, from the UN perspective that we see, is that it has brought this unnecessary tension between those of the Muslim faith and those of the Christian faith. I'm a Methodist, and it bothers me, that sometimes you hear or read, like when they had these cartoons, on Prophet Muhammad. I mean, it pains us just as much, because if millions and millions of more people of the Muslim faith, and we have some of them in the office, some of them work in my mission. I mean, these are peaceful people. They are not the people who are fighting. They are not terrorists. They are not Bin Laden. They are not, but when you start attacking the faith, even those who are not into that, they get very worried. So I get very worried when people start doing that, because I think once we go that way, it will completely get out of hand, because it antagonizes even in this country. There are millions of people of the Muslim faith. I mean, some of them American citizens who are peaceful people. It's got nothing. So, these three conflicts have this undercurrent right now. And I'm hoping that the leaders of in the Christian faith and in the Muslim faith can speak out, and because the last thing we need is to have this religious war, because it will just spread around the world and it will totally get out of hand. But it's a very worrying time because of that. And the UN can only try and say, we want to try and create a discussion among civilization, but it's and the media, the responsibility of the media sometimes is, people say it's press freedom, and it's my press freedom to do that, but there are things you don't say because it's press. Well, it's your freedom to go into a theater and say fire in the middle of a movie and watch how we trample on each other. But is that responsible? You wouldn't do that. So, it's sometimes we get into the arguments that are there. But anyway, yes, sir, yes.
Mr. Ambassador, Early during your discussion, you said that when you were told that you were, I guess, being appointed in
Yes.
ambassadorship,
Yes.
you really didn't want to.
Yes.
And when Ambassador Kamal presented you to us, he told us that you were the head of about 134 nations
Yes.
out of the 191 in the UN. My question to you is, how did you get this position that you didn't want to be an ambassador in the first place? And wielding such, great power, it's my understanding through Ambassador Kamal that you yielded with dignity, with respect, with honor. How do you feel having so much power?
Every morning I wake up and say, what did I do in my previous life that made me do this? And no, because you can look at it on the one hand and say it's power, but on the other hand, responsibility. Because remember that the Group of 77 in China, these are some of the poorest and the smallest countries in the world. One of the unique thing about the United Nations is that even the poorest countries want to be represented there, because this is the only spot on earth where you can go and talk to people around 190 countries elsewhere in the world. I mean, it would cost you a lot of money to visit 191 countries. But here you can go and, you can be a member of this organization and talk to everybody. But these countries have nothing. Right now we are involved in a very difficult fight, which you'll read about in the papers tomorrow and as we go along, where I'm involved in a bitter fight against the United States as usual, and the United Kingdom, Japan, and Germany, because these countries say they pay more money into the United Nations, and therefore they should have a larger say. But the founders of the United Nations, even in 1946, the countries that were there were not equal. The others were big countries that had just won in the war. They were small countries. But what they did, which was very, very brilliant, was that each member state that joined the United Nations would be assessed based on their ability to pay. So that the United States pays $1 billion whenever they pay. They're supposed to pay. They pay $1 billion and what have you. And, but there are countries that may pay $100,000 or maybe $1 million. So it doesn't mean because the United States pays $1 billion and I pay $1 million, it makes them more powerful, better than the other. It's ability to pay. So this is a body that has a charter that says we all have sovereign equality. So you may be the most little state around the corner, but you have the same thing. So we're involved in a fight like that because now those who pay more money, they say, we pay money to this thing, we better have a better say about it. But I say, this is not General Motors. In General Motors, you get your Class A stock, whatever they call it, and you buy those stocks, fine, you can have a bigger say in how the company runs. But this is a global organization where even the poorest countries can. And if one day if you become interested in take any part of the United Nations, I mean, take any organization, ECOSOC, Security Council, General Assembly, elsewhere. When you look, you discover that some of the smallest countries are the ones that have made the most amazing contributions to the United Nations. Because wisdom doesn't lie with the big countries or the rich countries. Even the smallest countries, sometimes they come and make a contribution that makes this a better world. And that's all we're saying. Give everybody a chance. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Sudan. Sudan is a big problem. Let me explain. One thing about that makes Sudan very difficult is because one of the things they no longer teach at school, which they used to teach when I went to school, is something called geography. And geography was a very interesting thing, because other than having to learn to spell Mississippi, but we also had to trace where the Mississippi River goes, and the Ganges, and But geography, it was an important thing, because if you look at